Next on the news, they are young students praying the rosary for something that's very close to their hearts.
One Diocese of Brooklyn school is leading the way, praying for peace and persecuted Christians around the world. They could soon be joined by nearly 1 million others. I'm Jessica Easthope. That story is ahead.
Also, it was a landmark moment in the history of the church. Now Pope Francis celebrates 60 years since the start of the Second Vatican Council. And how one man is using his house to send a clear message about the rights of Iranian women. Plus, you can call her an angel, how a postal worker helped to reunite a missing man with his family. I'm Christine Persichetti. Current News starts right now. It's a troubling statistic. 1 in every 7 Christians is being discriminated against because of their faith. And so now children in the Diocese of Brooklyn are praying for peace and unity. Over this past year, nearly 6,000 Christians were killed for their faith. And as persecution continues worldwide, Aid to the Church in Need is asking for prayers from the most innocent among us. Students at St. Joseph the Worker Catholic Academy are joining in on 1 million children praying the rosary. Current News' Jessica Easthope has the story from Windsor Terrace.
Padre Pio said, when 1 million children pray the rosary, the world will change. And though there's not 1 million of them yet, 272 students from St. Joseph the Worker Catholic Academy are hoping their prayers make a difference.
When stuff is going on that's so sad, and then you want to pray for those people that are hurt.
According to Open Doors USA's 2022 World Watch List, more than 360 million Christians face persecution. The students held olive wood rosaries made by Christians in Bethlehem, blessed by Father Lawrence Ryan, pastor of Holy Name of Jesus Church, as they prayed. One by one and bead by bead, they said each decade of the rosary. It was all for Aid to the Church in Need's 1 Million Children Pray the Rosary campaign. The annual initiative encourages children to pray for peace and unity throughout the world.
We look at it as an opportunity for the rosary to become something that people can rely upon and also build their faith, while also supporting the people in very difficult places like Nigeria, Pakistan, and other places where people suffer for their faith.
Principal Stephanie Gurman says participating in the Rosary Rally is teaching her students about ongoing Christian persecution and the power of prayer.
Bringing hope and peace, to people that are suffering and people that are being persecuted all over the world. We knew that'd be a message that resonated really well with our students.
Though scenes of war and violence playing out in places like Ukraine and the Middle East are far in distance, the students kept them close in their hearts.
It can literally change the world, because there might be wars, people starving, hungry out in the world, and just to pray for that could really help.
The prayer initiative will take place worldwide in 26 different languages on October 18th. In Windsor Terrace, Jessica Easthope, Currents News.
There's still time to register and join in with the hundreds of thousands of kids taking part in the global campaign. Just go to churchinneed.org/kids-praying-rosary. A reminder, the prayer is happening on October 18th. And here are some places that especially need your prayers. These are the top 50 countries facing Christian persecution, according to the organization Open Doors USA. The countries in dark orange are facing extreme persecution, while the countries in lighter orange are facing very high persecution. Among the 50, the top 3 persecuted countries are Afghanistan, North Korea, and Somalia. Nearly 2,000 migrants arrived in New York City over the weekend. That's according to Mayor Eric Adams, who made the announcement during Monday's Columbus Day parade. The 1,800 migrants is one of the largest groups to arrive in the city, and it's seen as a sign the wave is accelerating amid a strain in the city's shelter system. All this comes just days after Mayor Adams declared a state of emergency over the migrant crisis.
We should ensure that the entire country absorbs this influx of asylum seekers, so that we're not leaning on 3 cities in the northern part of the country.
On Friday, Adams asked state and federal officials to help address the continued arrival of the migrants. Adams says the crisis is set to cost the city more than $1 billion. More than 17,000 migrants have arrived in New York City since April. And Catholic Charities Brooklyn and Queens has been welcoming the migrants to New York City. On Tuesday, the group held an informational session and lunch at the presentation of the Blessed Virgin Mary in Queens. The teams provided hot meals prepared by Meals on Wheels. They also gave out winter outerwear, toiletries, and other essential items. These last 2 weeks have been especially violent ones in the city's transit system. According to new NYPD data, there have been more than a dozen attacks on the city's subways and buses. They include at least 3 murders and 5 stabbings. The NYPD data also says transit crime has shot up 42% this year compared to 2021. President Biden and G7 leaders remaining united against Russia after several new attacks in Ukraine. The president joined the leaders virtually on a call Tuesday morning to craft a response to the recent attacks by Russia, which have killed at least 19 people, with more missiles and armed drones. Also on the call was Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, who said tougher sanctions are needed against Russian President Vladimir Putin. Zelensky said that Putin is resorting to more desperate measures.
The leader of Russia, feeling the approach of his end, is trying to force the democratic world to surrender with a terrorist rush, to retreat, to lose. This can only be the desire of an insane person.
Russia unleashed the new round of attacks against Ukraine after a key bridge on the Crimean Peninsula was blown up over the weekend. Pope Francis is joining in on a Cry for Peace, a 3-day interreligious conference, which the Holy Father will end with a prayer service. The final event will be held on Tuesday, October 25th at the Colosseum, a monument believed by some historians to be a site of early Christian martyrdom. Representatives from all the world's major religions will take part in both the service and the conference. Today marks a pivotal moment in the life of the Catholic Church. It is the 60th anniversary of the Second Vatican Council, a convocation which set off a process of deep transformation within the Church itself and its relations with the modern world. Justin McClellan reports on how the Holy See and Pope Francis celebrated the milestone anniversary.
The celebration, marking 60 years since the opening of the Second Vatican Council, began with 2 laypeople reading out significant passages from the Council's texts. They recalled the optimistic tone of Pope John XXIII in his opening speech, in which he asked the participants to not be discouraged by those who claimed that the Church was worse off than ever before, without recalling the problems that surrounded past councils.
A noi sembra di dover risolutamente dissentire da codesti profeti di sventura, che annunziano sempre il peggio, quasi incombesse la fine del mondo.
The remains of John XXIII, who convened the council and guided its first steps, were moved from the side altar, where they typically rest, to the central nave, so as to be visible to those present. This procession then made its way toward the altar, imitating the same procession which opened Vatican II 60 years ago. Among them were some who were present at the council. In his homily, Pope Francis explained that the Second Vatican Council was the Church's response to the question that Jesus asked St. Peter in the Gospel, "Do you love me?" The Pope said that the Church's relationship with God should be one of love that doesn't leave room for other emotions.
Whether it is progressivism that fits itself to the world, or traditionalism or backwardsness that longs for a past world, these are not signs of love, but of infidelity.
Pope Francis said it is necessary to rediscover the council that attempted to mold the Church and Christians primarily into pastors and servers, rather than being judgmental.
How often have people preferred to be supporters of their own group rather than serve all? Progressives and conservatives rather than brothers and sisters. Of the right or of the left rather than of Jesus. To prop themselves up, keepers of the truth, or solo artists, rather than recognize themselves as humble children of the Holy Mother Church.
The Pope asked Christians to avoid all kinds of polarization, which he said rejects the Christian identity and abandons the love with which God founded the Church.
That was Justin McClellan reporting. One of the most notable effects of the Second Vatican Council were some major changes to the Mass. 2 include the Mass was translated into the language of the locals instead of the traditional Latin, and the altar, as well as the priest celebrating the Mass, were turned around to face the congregation. While the idea of synodality was not something specifically mentioned by the documents of the Second Vatican Council, the Secretary General of the Synod of Bishops, Cardinal Mario Gretsch, says their vision of the Church is at the heart of the Synod process. That was part of an anniversary message published by Cardinal Gretsch. You could read more about how Vatican II led to the current Synod process by going online at thetablet.org. A Russian-speaking hacker group is taking responsibility for a cyber attack on Monday that shut down the websites for 14 major airports. As Isabel Rosales reports, it's raising red flags about vulnerabilities in America's cyber infrastructure.
A cyber attack known as a distributed denial of service, shutting down the websites of 14 major airports.
The reason why they're alarming just in general is that they're so easy to accomplish.
Flooding computer servers with phony web traffic to knock them offline.
Anyone can do this for free or maybe at most spend $100. Kids do it all the time.
While there was no reported impact to actual air travel, the incident is bringing attention to the vulnerability of vital services.
Right now, the internet is like the wild, wild west.
A Russian-speaking hacking group known as Killnet is claiming responsibility for the cyber attack. Any ties to the Kremlin are unknown, but they've stepped up activity to target organizations in NATO countries since Russia's February invasion of Ukraine.
We live in a highly connected, highly vulnerable world where we don't control all that risk because of the complexities of the supply chain, where you might have small and medium businesses that might unintentionally transfer risk to you.
Cybersecurity expert Roger Grimes says the most important thing you can do to protect yourself online is learn how to spot a scam.
Number one is to not get tricked by social engineering. Social engineering is involved into 70 to 90% of all successful attacks.
Isabel Rosales, Currents News.
New York is taking another step to keep its statewide gun laws in effect. State Attorney General Letitia James announced Monday that she's asking to appeal a federal court's temporary restraining order against New York's concealed carry law. If the court approves the appeal, the whole law will remain in effect. But as it stands now, the temporary restraining order prevents the state from enacting a ban on people carrying concealed weapons in certain public places and creating gun-free zones. Amid the court battle, New York City Mayor Eric Adams enacted 2 new gun laws on Tuesday. One turns Times Square into a gun-free zone, similar to the state measures. The other calls for new requirements to study the trafficking of illegal firearms into the city. Gun groups have been arguing that the new restrictions violate their constitutional rights. The Supreme Court has decided not to weigh in on a case that would have decided if an unborn baby has constitutional rights. The justices turning away an appeal by the Catholic group Servants of Christ for Life and 2 women who were challenging Rhode Island's Reproductive Privacy Act, a law that effectively secures abortion rights set out in the Supreme Court's Roe v. Wade ruling. The plaintiffs argued they should have had the chance to vote against the law in a referendum. The 2 women who were pregnant at the time the suit was filed also sought to bring claims on behalf of their unborn children, saying the law erased their babies' legal rights. The state dismissed the case in May. The High Court did not explain its reason for not taking up the case. There's a lot more news headed your way. Protesters in Iran continue to take to the streets despite a crackdown by authorities. Plus, no homes and no jobs. The effects of Hurricane Ian still being felt in Florida. And in New York City, a proposed bill that would pay people to be the parking police to rat out those who park illegally. The Iranian government is cracking down on the western areas of the country as anti-regime protesters took to the streets. Several protesters were killed over the weekend during the demonstrations. This is the fourth week since the uprising started over severe restrictions on women's rights, and it started last month after the death of 22-year-old Mahsa Amini, who died in the custody of Iran's morality police. Meantime, Iranian authorities haven't updated their official death toll in weeks. One Iran-focused human rights group says at least 185 lives were lost since protests began. That includes at least 19 children. Outside of that, the Kurdistan Human Rights Network said security forces injured another 825 protesters and arrested more than 2,000 in those regions. Back here in the United States, hundreds are showing their support for the protesters. One San Francisco man taking it a step further by sharing the Iranians' rally cry on the front of his own home. Dion Lim reports.
This Marina District home is sending a powerful message to the world. The words women, life, and freedom prominently painted on its facade.
It also says it in Farsi, Zan Zindagi Azadi.
Those words, the rallying cry for the people of Iran and around the world, including here in San Francisco, drawing attention to the country's 40-year fight for rights. Protests recently ignited over the death of 22-year-old Mahsa Amini, who died in custody for allegedly violating hijab rules. Salman Shariat is a first-generation Persian American. He came up with the idea to paint his Bay Street home just a week ago.
It happened very quickly. With Fleet Week coming up, it was very important to get it done before Fleet Week started. I thought this was a good way to get people to see it and notice it.
Salman insists this isn't a story about him. It's about raising awareness, which seems to be working.
All my friends from even like Irvine are posting about this, and my friends in like New York, all my friends all around the U.S. are posting this specific building.
Sarah is Persian American and walked 2 miles to see it.
And even people who don't really know what's going on in Iran, they'll walk by this and question it and want to know more. So I think that's like the beauty about it.
Hamid Azimi of the group Iranian American Community of Northern California believes Salman's home is just one example of how this round of demonstrations may actually create change.
Not the same that they were before. The young generation is organized. They are working in small teams, both on the street and on social media. And everybody knows that this time around, it is different. People from all walks of life are helping.
As for Salman, he's not sure how long the paint job will stick around.
Today's problems don't worry me. I haven't solved yesterday's yet.
He's just grateful to be Persian American and living in this country, to have the privilege of being able to paint his home and see the response from his community.
Joy, smiles. Everyone loves it. It brings a lot of smiles. I love that people, it makes them smile, which then makes me smile, which is awesome.
That was Dion Lim reporting. About 400,000 Iranian immigrants live in the U.S. Roughly 1 in 10 globally live in Southern California. To Ian's aftermath now, and officials in Florida have confirmed 8 more deaths linked to the hurricane. The death toll in the state is now at least 102, but there were also 5 deaths in North Carolina, 1 in Virginia, and 3 in Cuba. The search for victims is taking place across a large area on Florida's southwest coast, and residents are gearing up for possibly years' worth of work to rebuild. The images coming out of Fort Myers have been devastating. Neighborhoods leveled and people left homeless. As Kelsey Carnes reports, people who live in the beach community are also in search of jobs.
You really have to be here to truly understand what happened here. Mobile home communities looking like landfills, and enormous boats picked up and stacked one on top of the other.
I've been through a couple tragedies, I guess.
People who live near Fort Myers Beach facing a new normal, trying to find a safe and stable place to live. Another problem they're facing, unemployment.
A lot of people lost jobs. My job is washed out,
Michael Wetzel, who lives in the area, says he used to work at a grocery store nearby.
I lived on the island and lived in this neighborhood for a long time.
He evacuated as soon as the order came down from the county. And in addition to losing his job, his boat, along with 2 others, damaged and far away from where it started.
They're tangled up in the mangrove trees about a mile from here.
Wetzel says he can only imagine what shrimp boat captains are going through. It's a big industry in Fort Myers, and these boats are shrimping boats. A mangled metal mess, boats piled one on top of the other at this marina. A cleanup that will take weeks, if not months. And while the extent of property damage is visible to the naked eye, Wetzel is just thankful to be here.
This is where I live.
He says boats are replaceable, homes are replaceable, and jobs are also replaceable. But people are not.
I don't value possessions so much in life. I value just life.
That was Kelsey Carnes reporting. There's also concerns that the deadly red tide will return to Florida in the wake of Ian. Environmentalists say the storm runoff could trigger another bloom of the algae and toxins that are harmful to fish, shellfish, birds, and mammals. Still to come on Currents News, talk about distracted driving. A new study out shows some drivers aren't driving at all. We'll explain. Plus, he was lost, but now he's found. How a postal worker helped deliver the good news. Do you have a story idea or want to share a tip? Email us at newstips@desalesmedia.org or call our 24-hour number, 718-517-3122. We'll be right back. It appears some drivers are getting really lazy behind the wheel and letting the self-driving feature on their cars do all the work. A study conducted by the Insurance Institute for Highway Safety shows more than half of General Motors users surveyed, along with about 40% of Tesla users and a small number of Nissan users, were comfortable letting the system drive without watching what was happening on the road. Well, you better watch where you park if you drive in New York City. The City Council is considering a policy that would pay people up to $44 each time they call in a complaint about a car blocking a fire hydrant, bike lane, or anywhere else they're not supposed to be. And that would make tattling on those who park illegally lucrative. And finally tonight, a family has their prayers answered thanks to an angel on earth. A lost man from Arizona was found in New Mexico thanks to a postal worker who called for help. Cameron Polam has the story.
Back in September, postal worker Mary McCarty arrived early to the Animas post office, soon spotting an older gentleman and his dog seemingly wandering about the parking lot.
I knew he wasn't new to the area because I'm at the post office, so I kind of know everybody that moves in and out.
Concerned for his well-being, Mary says she approached to see if he needed any help. That's when the man, who said his name was Glenn, told her that he had driven there from New York when his Jeep ran out of gas, forcing him to walk through the desert all night.
And he's like, well, I need to get hold of my wife and she can bring me some gas. And I said, great. What's her name? I don't remember. That's okay.
Little did she know, 2 hours west, across the Arizona state line, a contingent of family, friends, strangers, and law enforcement were desperately searching for the man now in front of her.
Knowing that there's so many directions he could have gone into the desert, into the mountains, into the canyons, into back roads, anywhere where somebody maybe wouldn't even find him.
Christy Zumas is Glenn's daughter. She says 14 years ago he suffered a traumatic brain injury from a motorcycle accident that nearly took his life.
He has very severe short-term and long-term memory loss.
Glenn no longer drives, but somehow got the keys and drove off with his dog Maggie. After an agonizing day-long search, Christy got an early morning phone call.
When the call first came in, I knew it was either going to be great news or terrible news, because that call was coming at 7 a.m.
Thanks to a woman named Mary, Glenn had been found safely.
When I finally got to talk to his daughter, we had this instant connection.
She is just the brightest spirit. Not only did she do everything else, she actually also found my father's Jeep.
What a great story. That was Cameron Polam reporting. Christy says she was blown away by the kindness of this stranger who has now become a friend. And that is Currents News. I'm Christine Persichetti. Thank you for joining us because we are putting your faith in the news. Hope to see you again next time.